Hello, I welcome you to my channel. I will discuss history of English literature from Old English period to Restoration. I will focus on major historical and literary events and some important genres that evolved over the period of time. So let's start. First, I would discuss English literature from Old English literature to 1100. Now, this is the overview. The Angles and Saxons conquered what is now called England in the 5th and 16th centuries. In the 17th century, Christian missionaries taught the English to write. The English wrote down law codes and later their poems. Northumbria soon produced Cædmon and Bede. Heroic poetry of a Christian kind is the chief legacy of Old English literature, notably Beowulf and the Elegies. A considerable prose literature grew up after Alfred. There were 4 centuries of writing in English before the Norman Conquest. So if we look at this time period, we see the English nation emerging with its language and religion. Angles and Saxons, they brought with them their culture and their language, and their language impacted the local languages and it produced earliest forms of English language. And then Saint Augustine brought religion to this region and converted the English people into Christianity. Two important historical figures of this time period, Saint Bede and Alfred. Saint Bede, 676 to 735, monk of Wearmouth and Jarrow, scholar, biblical commentator, and historian. Then Alfred, king of Wessex from 871, who defended his kingdom against the Danes and translated wisdom books into English. Alfred's authors, Alfred in his translation work was supported by Saint Augustine, whose time span is 354 to 430. Orsius, early 5th century. Boethius, 480 to 524. Gregory, 540 to 604. So these are the 4 authors who are usually recognized as Alfred's wise authors. Homer, we are all familiar with Homer. Homer belonged to 8th century BC, and he was the author of 2 magnificent verse epics, the Iliad about the siege of Troy and the anger of Achilles, and the Odyssey about the adventures of Odysseus as he makes his way home from Troy to Ithaca. Runs a Germanic alphabetic secret writing. Runic letters have straight lines which are easier to cut. Now I come to the timeline of this time period. AD 43, conquest of Britain by Emperor Claudius. 98, Tacitus Germania. 313, we have this toleration of Christians, that Christians, they were tolerated, accepted. And 314, we have Council of Arles. And 330, Constantinople was founded and Saint Helena finds true cross. 384, very important, Saint Jerome, Vulgate edition of the Bible. And 410, legends recalled from Britain. 413, Saint Augustine of Hippo, the city of God. 417, Roscius, he writes history of the world. 430, Saint Patrick in Ireland. Saint Ninian in northern Britain. 449, important, Hengist and Horsa, conquest by Angles, Saxons, and Jutes begins. So this is the time period when Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, they started invading England. 500, British resistance, Battle of Mons, Badonicus, St. David in Wales. 521, Hygelac the Great. 524, Boethius, Consolation of Philosophy. 529, Saint Benedict founds Monte Cassino. And legendary reign of Beowulf. So 529 is synonymous with the legend of Beowulf. 547, Gildas, conquest of Britain. 563, Venantius, Fortunatus, Hymns of the Cross, Saint Columba on Iona, 577 Battle of Durham, British confined to Wales and Dumnonia. 591 Gregory of Tours, History of the Franks. 597 Anirin by Gododin, Gregory sends Augustine to Canterbury. Then Saint Columba as well. 615 Ethelfrith, king of Bernicia, defeats Britons at Chester. 616-32 Edmund, king of Northumbria. 627 Edmund converted by Paulinus. 632 Sutton, who shaped by burial. 635 Oswald, king of Northumbria, defeats Cadwallon at Havenfield. 643 from this date, early heroic poem, Wit and Brush Waldeer. Then 664 Synod of Whitby accepts authority of Rome. 657 to 80 Cædmon's hymn, Hilda Abbess of Whitby. This is the major event. Then Cædmon poems, Genesis, A, Daniel, Christ, and Satan. They were all written between 657 to 80. And 669 to 90, Theodore of Tarsus, Archbishop of Canterbury, Wearmouth and Jarrow founded. 678, earliest date for composition of Beowulf. 688, Exodus. Then 698, Eadfrith, Lindisfarne Gospels, first linguistic records, Ruthvel Cross. 731, Bede, Historica Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum. And then 756 to 96, we have Offa, king of Mercia. 782, the poetic elegies, Elquin at Charlemagne court. 793, Viking sack, Lindisfarne. So this is in 793 that we first time hear the names of the Vikings who had a great impact on the coming events, rather to change the history of Europe. Vikings, they invaded the most part of the Europe, and wherever they went, they conquered everything. They were very cruel. They are still known for their brutality. 800 after this dates, Sinwulf, Christ second, Aline, Juliana, Fates of the Apostles, and the most important event was Charlemagne was crowned emperor. And then 1802, Egbert, king of Wessex. Then 851, Genesis B. And the important event is James spent winter in England. 865, Danish army in East Anglia. 871 to 99, Andreas, Alfred, king of Wessex, the only kingdom unconquered by Danes. And 878, Alfredian translations, pastoral care, ecclesiastical history, and then the people who supported him, Orosius, Boethius, Soliloquies, things like that. Anglo-Saxon chronicle began. So all this was supported by Alfred. And the important event then was, of course, defeat of the Danes and the resultant Treaty of Wedmore. 909, Beowulf composed by this date. If we look at the important names of books and authors and historical figures, we find Cædmon's hymn in 657 to 80. And then we come to Bede, Historica Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum. And then very important name, King Alfred of Wessex, who is famous for his translations. And of course, we have Beowulf, the earliest epic in English literature. And 1910, Abbey of Cluny was founded at Burgundy. 911 to 18, Judith. 919, the Phoenix, Mercia subject to Wessex. 924 to 39, Athelstan, king of Wessex. 937, Brunanbusch in Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Battle of Brunanbusch, Athelstan defeats Scots and Vikings. 954, end of Scandinavian Kingdom of York, England united under Wessex. And then 959 to 975, reign of Edgar. And 960 to 980 is called period of monastic revival, Dunstan, Archbishop of Canterbury. 973 coronation of Edgar, 978, 1016, the major menu. This is very important time period, 978 to 1016. The major poetry manuscripts, Junius book, Versailles book, Exeter book, Beowulf famous, and it was all during reign of Ethelred II. 991, after this date, the Battle of Morden. Battle of Morden is the event. 1990 to 92, Alfric Catholic Homilies, 993 to 8, Alfric Lives of the Saints, 1003 to 23, we have Woolston, Archbishop of York, and 1014, Woolston, Sermo Lupi ad Anglos, Sweyn of Denmark, King of England. 1017 to 35, reign of Senate. 1043 to 66, reign of Edward the Confessor. 1066, Harold King, Battle of Stamford Bridge, Battle of Hastings, and William King. So this is called Norman Conquest in his English history and literature. 1154, end of Petersburg Chronicle. What we have in this time period is that we have early forms of English language. We have Angles, Saxons, and Jews settled in England, and they brought with them their culture, their ways of living, their ways of building buildings, their art, etc. And most importantly, in this time period, Saint Augustine brought Christianity to this region. And the earliest literature was religious in nature. First, it was in poetic form. Then there was prose as well. The poetry was basically canon. Alliteration was the main poetic device that was used. And King Alfred was the most important king as far as his heroics are concerned and his support for translation is concerned. Now I come to Middle English literature, that is from 1066 to 1500. Middle English literature, 1066 to 1500. This time period is very important. In this time period, English language took a definite shape. Midland English, it became established. English literature developed its own form and tone, and English authors, they became popular for their writings. Basically, it was still poetry that ruled. But then in this time period, we have drama taking its roots and paving way for the Renaissance drama. We have morality plays, mystery plays, historical plays. So in this way, this Middle English period is very crucial. So let's see what is there in this time period. First, I would discuss 14th century, then 15th century, and then 16th century literature. Middle Ages, the overview, general overview, that a new kind of writing emerged and handwriting and printing. Printing is very important. The impact of French, the French still had its day. It still ruled. French was still considered a language of the elite, of the court, of the upper class. Then new practices, scribal practices emerged. And then there were changes in language, as I told you, in this time period. Middle English dialect became prominent and became established with the passage of time. And important thing is that although poetry was always there and their forms of writing were also, and other forms of writing in rudimentary form were also there, actual literary consciousness developed during this time period. And the new fashions were French and Latin epics and romances, court literature. Then medieval institutions, they were very much there. Church was very popular. And there was 30 allied with church, with feudals. And the poetry was basically lyrical. And English prose, it emerged during this time period. Now we come to some important persons and events in this time period. So as we discussed earlier, that when we move from 1066 onwards, Latin was dominant. And later on, the impact of French was there. And out of all this, English language developed. The Italian-born monk of Bec, Saint Anselm, Archbishop of Canterbury, 1093 to 1109, and theologian Curs Deus Homo, why did God become man? That was what Saint Anselm wrote. And another 12th century Benedictine chronicle Orderic Whitley, an English monk in Normandy, Historica Ecclesiastica, William of Malmesbury, and then other names like Jocelyn D. Brakeland, Henry of Huntington, Geoffrey of Monmouth, Historia Regum Britannia. Then there were humanists, John of Salisbury, Polycraticus, Walter Map, D. Nagius, Curilium, Matthew Paris, etc. Then Anglo-Normans. Anglo-Norman is the French spoken by Normans in England. And Maria de France and Chrétien de Troyes may have written some of their Arthurian romance in England. Vase, Roman de Rome. So that was the time period of romance, basically. And then Latin fathers of the church, Jerome, 342 to 420, whose Latinum translation of the Bible from Greek and Hebrew into vulgar tongue of the Roman Empire, known as the Vulgate, became the Bible of the West. So Saint Jerome is one of the most important persons in Christianity. Then Augustine of Hippo, 354 to 430, was the chief influence on Western theology until the 13th century. Then Ambrose of Milan, 340 to 97, Pope Gregory the Great. The chief orders of the monks are Benedictines, follow the rule of Saint Benedict of Nursia, the foundation of Western monasticism. Then Carthusians were founded by Saint Bruno at Le Grand Chartreuse. Then Cistercians, and then the four orders of friars, Franciscan friars minor or grave friars founded by Saint Francis of Assisi in 1210. Then Dominicans, orders of preachers or black friars founded by Saint Dominic in 1216. Then Carmelites or white friars founded in 1154. Then Austin friars were founded in 1256. They follow a rule based on the precepts of Saint Augustine. Now we come to the 14th century. And 14th century is popular because of spiritual writing of Julian of Norwich. Then secular prose also emerged. Then we have a particular kind of poetry that is called Ricardian poetry. And the famous work is Piers Plowman, then Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, John Gower, William Langland. And we are all familiar with Geoffrey Chaucer and his works, the Parlement, Fowls, Troilus and Criseyde, the Canterbury Tales. And the major events from 1066 to 1399 once more. 1066 William I, 1087 William II, 1100 Henry I, 1135 Stephen, 1154 Henry II, 1170 murder of Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury by agents of the king, 1189 Richard I on Third Crusade, 1199 John, 1216 Henry III, 1272 Edward I, 1307 Edward II, 1314 the Battle of Bannockburn, 1327 Edward III, 1346 the Battle of Criseyde, 1348 to 9 Black Death, and then 1377 Richard II, and 1381 Peasants' Revolt, 1399 we have Henry IV. 1337 to 1433, 100 Years' War between England and France, and 1346 Edward III's victory at Criseyde, 1348 to 9 Black Death, 1356 victory at Poitiers, 1370 Geoffrey Chaucer, the Book of Duchess, 1377 William Langland, Piers Plowman, 1382 5 Chaucer's Troilus and Criseyde, and 1387 Chaucer begins Canterbury Tales, John Gower begins Confessio Amantis, and then popularity of mystery plays is evident from Chaucer's Miller's Tale. And the important event in this time period is, of course, is Peasants' Revolt in 1381. And in 1399, Richard II deposed Henry. Then chronology of Chaucer's works before 1372, the first part of the Mount of the Rose, 1368 to 72, the Book of the Duchess, 1378 to 83, the House of Fame, 1380 to 82, the Parlement of Fowls, 1382 to 60, Voice and Troilus and Criseyde, 1387 to Parlement and Arcite, 1387, the Legend of Good Women, 1388 to 1400, the Canterbury,